name's Ruth Andrade, and I'm originally from Brazil, but I'm now in the UK, and I work for Lush. And I like to say that I'm a human animal currently alive on planet Earth, and where else would I rather be than this beautiful, pulsating planet that is undergoing a unique moment in our history. And I like to say that I really want to support like the full unfolding of life, like the potential for life to unfold on the planet. And in these transitional times, I couldn't think of a better place to work than at Lush, a company that cares so much about people, animals, and the planet, of course. And as you may have already noticed, maybe already, or maybe you know me from before, I'm a little bit unconventional. And then, of course, I don't have a proper job title, but I'm a part of a team that brings together Earth Care and what we call impact reporting, which helps to measure, advise, and then report on our impact. I've also been involved with our giving and our giving strategies. So, together, the common line is basically how can we give back to people, animals, and the planet? And this is what I wanted to start talking about today. How can we give back more than we take? Or as at Lush, we say, how can we leave the world lusher than we found it? And we could also call this an interpretation of the idea or the concept of regeneration, which is probably what you've been invited to watch this talk for. As I said before, this is a really interesting moment in history. Like, my generation has never gone through an event that really mobilizes the whole world. And having been involved in the environmental movement already for a decade and a half, we really hoped that climate change would be this mobilizing force or mobilizing topic that gets the whole humanity to huddle together around solving the climate crisis. But I suppose we needed something that could shorten the distance between our actions and their consequences. And I think COVID-19 has really done that. It's showing us without a question of a doubt the effect of decision making, of policies, of community action straight away within weeks. So anyway, going back to my original question, how can I and the world give back more than we take? And this is a question right now because I feel like so much is being taken away from us. Sometimes our work, for some of you, for many, our incomes, our freedom, our ability to come together, our ability to see our loved ones, and in some cases, even our health is being taken away from us. So how can we still be thinking about giving back? And that's exactly what I see happening. That's exactly what's been happening. I think as an environmentalist, I've been preparing for collapse for a while. It was pretty obvious that it was bound to happen. But in my head, like in the way I thought about this, it would be much darker than it actually is. I thought that would be major collapse of supply chains and that could probably be wars. And what I'm seeing now is that people are being moved by solidarity, compassion, there are mutual aid groups springing up everywhere. And of course, there are exceptions to this, and we need to be very vigilant so that this emergency situation is not used as an excuse to permanently take away our rights, like we're already seeing some examples of that happening. But in my corner of the world, and I think in my place of privilege, I'm seeing people signing up to be volunteers in record numbers and scientists sharing data like never before. Like, this has never happened before. This amount of sharing of data and trying to find solutions together globally with countries supporting each other. In modern history, I can't think of a situation when that happens. So I also say that the virus came to awaken the humanity inside of us. And then how can we use this crisis and this time to really cultivate this humanity? How can we feed it? How can we nourish? How can we hold on to it for as long as we can so that it's this humanity that can guide us as we design what's going to come next? And I really wish that we may sharpen our compassion and our regenerosity, and we can really hold this and we can stay. Like, we can really hold this as a rite of passage for humanity and really allow yourself to be transformed rather than just hiding or shying away from what's happening right now. And maybe at the end of this, we're going to learn that we didn't need so much after all. Like, we're really seeing the cracks in the system like never before. Like the vulnerability of our economic model, the vulnerability of our social, political, cultural model, how people are still being left behind, and more importantly, how we're only as strong as our weakest links. We're seeing how we're all connected, how we're one global community. So, yeah, let's let this really awaken us from our collective slumber and transform how we choose to participate on the planet, like how we choose to be part of the community of life. You may also have read in the news in the past few weeks that there has been a great article on Scientific American showing how destroyed habitats create the perfect condition for coronaviruses to emerge. And I think this also brings an important piece of what the regenerative movement has been trying to say. We have been systematically destroying the wild. Of all mammals on the planet, only 4% are wild animals. 36% are humans, and the rest is animals that are then killed for our consumption. So 4% of wild animals. We've also been doing the same strategy to our food system and agriculture, like through monoculture, through reducing the diversity, reducing the complexity of our food systems. We're also destroying the wild. And then we've been doing that to our cultures, to our epistemologies, to our belief systems. We've transformed everything into this monoculture, consumer-based culture where we are manipulated by information and social media. We have also unwild ourselves. So in this process of destroying the wild at every level, we are now seeing some of the consequences of that. And we are also seeing how planetary health is inexorably linked to our human health and the health of our animal friends. We are one system, we are one whole. And we know that our human health and our human existence also depends on the health of the whole. And in order to survive and in order to continue participating in the unfolding of life and participating in this wonderful co-creation on this planet, we have one job as humanity now. Like George Monbiot called it our central project. I say that it's one task on our to-do list, on our humanity to-do list. Planetary regeneration and leaving the world lusher than we found it. So let's use this historic moment. Like, let's not let this wake-up call go to waste. And I know that not everyone has the privilege to stay home with our basic needs met. But we do. And if you're watching the video, you're probably part of the human population that has this privilege now to stop and take a breath. But with this privilege comes responsibility. So how can we use this time not to imagine the apocalypse, but to dream the revolution? And then as our systems come back online, and it's likely to be slowly and to take some time, what do we want to leave behind? What is no longer serving us? What does not serve life on the planet? And what do we want to welcome? What new practices, new systems, and sometimes old practices and old systems do we want to embrace and do we want to bring to our societies? At every level, at a political level, at a cultural level, at a philosophical, spiritual level, at a social level. And more importantly, if we hold this privilege now, how can we use this time to imagine a world that works for everyone? How can we transition our economy into regenerative economies? How can we, like the other species, help create more diversity, more beauty, more life? Imagine that behind the products that we buy and our supply networks, we could leave a trail of healthy soils, clean air and water, more wildlife, abundant forests, clean oceans, instead of leaving a trail of suffering, waste, and pollution like we're doing now. This is what we're meant to do as humans. And then I'll just tell a quick story of a project that we have in Japan. I visited Japan in early January, just before the whole Corona crisis hit, and it was really interesting to see. Like, I could see how this project really showed a narrative of how humans can live in harmony with nature. The place where the project is a narrow valley with it's a narrow valley where they traditionally lived at what I call a human scale, with producing rice and a diversity of crops at human scale. And by living in harmony with the cycles of nature rather than fighting cycles of nature, you can actually have a human presence that helps biodiversity. So the systems there were really diverse. You had lots of insects, you had snakes, you had frogs, you had rice, you had food, you had clean water. And it also allowed for what we call keystone species, the species that are really fundamental to support ecosystem health, were also there. In that case, it's the buzzard, the gray buzzard, that is, a bird that feeds on smaller animals. And you could have the whole chain. You had the whole chain that was in harmony with humans there. And then the rice production moved to flatlands because you can get machinery, it's much more economic. And then when we have an economy that is only measuring one kind of capital, that's financial capital, and it's not measuring social capital, it's not measuring ecological capital, natural capital, living capital, intellectual capital. When we have this monoculture economy, a monoculture economy needs monoculture functions and monoculture strategies. So that area then got abandoned and fewer people lived there, the exodus, and then they stopped growing rice. So life in that area actually reduced. Complexity got reduced. Bamboo, as a pioneering species, took over, and the food chain of this keystone species, in this case of the gray buzzard, got interrupted. It got broken. So now there is a project to regenerate the area by removing the bamboo, by reintroducing rice, by introducing humans back, and reintroducing diversity of cultures. And then they're seeing that the frogs have returned, and they're seeing that the insects have returned. And then after 6 years of this project, the gray buzzard finally returned. This is a project on the migration line of the gray buzzard. So it's important that we align the meeting of human needs through our economy to the support of all life on the planet. Like, we are seeing more and more and more of those examples, and Lush has loads of those examples as well. Our current human presence on the planet is not conducive to life. We are crossing what are called the planetary boundaries. This is a beautiful study and beautiful work from the Stockholm Institute that defined 9 planetary boundaries. We've already crossed the boundaries, so we're in overshoot in 4 of those boundaries, and some of them we don't have enough information to even know whether we've crossed them or not. And then Kate Raworth and the donut economic folk then said, well, not only do we have an ecological ceiling that we must stay under, we can't overshoot like we have already done for things like the carbon cycle and the nitrogen cycle, but we also have a social foundation that we need to meet. So we need to try and stay within the ecological boundaries of the planet, while elevating our social foundations so that humans, and I always like to include non-human animals as well, can have their needs met and be able to thrive, not only to survive, but actually to thrive and co-evolve with the planet. And this is called the donut economic. So how I mean, we can do this. This is what the whole regenerative movement is about. How can we increase the carrying capacity of the planet, the capacity of the planet to sustain diverse, complex life, and at the same time meet the needs of our human and non-human communities, so we can also play our role in this co-evolution of life. Like this is possible. There are practices around it. There is a theory around it. And I know it sounds really big, because it is big. It's existential. But as we take this collective breath, we may have a crash and a collapse that actually creates space for us to design a new system. And like Greta said, we can't return to normal because our normal was a crisis. And as we may feel sometimes paralyzed because it sounds so big, it's also important to remember the power that we have to intervene in the system. In ecology, we say that everything is connected to everything else. And this also reveals to us infinite possibilities to intervene in the system. You may have heard this story of how wolves meander rivers and how whales regulate the climate. If you haven't seen this story, I really recommend watching this video on YouTube. There are 2 videos, really good. How can we too be this keystone species that leaves the world lusher than we found it? How can we use our money? How can we choose what to work on, like our professions, our gifts, like how we express our gifts in the world? How can we choose how we get our electricity, how we vote, what bank we leave our money in, how we organize our communities, what kind of education we choose to have for ourselves and our children? I saw this beautiful quote the other day that this is not about leaving the planet better for our children. This is about leaving our children better for the planet. If we consider that our whole culture has to shift, our whole economy, then yeah, let's invent. Let's use this human quality that is present in humans and not in many other animal species, which is creativity, invention, the capacity to dream. Let's really use this unique capacity of human beings to dream all these points of intervention, to dream how we want to redesign this when we come out of this crisis. So this is an invitation for you to spend at least some of your lockdown time thinking, what can you influence? Really understanding how we're all interconnected. From this deep understanding, what are the points of influence that you have? What changes can you make that increases the chances of us having a future that works for all life? What are the things that you're ready to leave behind? And what are the new practices, the new skills, the new projects that you would like to embrace? And then use this time to really get those skills and really learn how you can contribute and how you can participate. There is so much online content, so many good books to read. I like to say that let's come out of this other side with really like a real clarity of the role you want to play in the society and this environment. And for me personally, this has been a time for a lot of work, but also a time for reflection, for going deeper inside. I'm reading a beautiful book called The Systems View of Life, A Unifying Vision by Capra and Luisi. And I'm also strengthening my physical bodies through exercise, strengthening my mind through meditation, but being really active in online communities of practices around regeneration. So we're also learning and exchanging and co-creating this more global strategies of how we can shift different parts of the system. Can we shift investments and finance systems? How can we shift philanthropy and how we're giving? How can we shift supply chains and how we get the materials that we need to move a regenerative economy? How can we shift education and learning? There are loads of groups that are planning those things right now and developing new businesses, new initiatives. Like, join the regeneration. You can join this movement too. And one very simple way to do that is that we're going to have a series of 3 other Instagram lives where we're going to be going deeper into some of these areas. of how we, Lush as a business, can contribute, and also how we as the community of life can contribute to really leave the world lusher than we found it. And I say, let's practice social distancing by continuing to cultivate our togetherness, to feel our connectedness. And of course, I'm going to cry. To emerge out of this as one humanity. That's like, this is it. That's what we've been preparing for. May you really use this time well. And I hope to see you at our Instagram lives on our channel at lusher dot then you're gonna see this on the screen. Anyway, as one humanity, cultivate our togetherness, and I hope to see you next time. Please leave your questions in the chat. I'm happy to answer all of the questions that you're gonna be putting there today or when you're watching this video. Thank you, and yeah, we're in this together. Thanks.